The slap echoed through the break room like a gunshot. Turkey and Swiss, not ham and cheddar. That's what started it all. Madison's hand connected with my cheek so hard that my vision blurred for a second and stars danced behind my eyelids. The sandwich I'd carefully wrapped sat on the counter between us, suddenly looking like evidence of a crime I didn't commit. Two other employees froze mid-conversation by the microwave, their plastic containers forgotten in their hands. The refrigerator hummed louder in the silence that followed, as if even the appliances were shocked. I touched my burning cheek, felt the heat spreading across my skin like spilled coffee, and looked directly into her cold blue eyes. One word came out of my mouth, quiet but clear as a bell: enough. She blinked, surprised by my calm tone when she'd expected tears or apologies. Then her face twisted into a sneer that made her look ugly despite her expensive makeup. "You're nothing," she hissed, grabbing the sandwich and throwing it in the trash with dramatic flair. As she strutted out in her designer heels that clicked against the linoleum, I pressed a paper towel to my face and realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about lunch anymore. I didn't run to HR like she probably expected me to do. Instead, I walked slowly back to my desk, each step deliberate and measured, and sat down in my creaky office chair. I opened a new folder on my computer with steady fingers that didn't shake despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I labeled it documentation and started typing with the precision of a court reporter. Date, time, witnesses present, exact words spoken, physical contact made. My cheek still stung with a deep throbbing pain, but my mind felt clearer than it had in months of enduring Madison's daily torment. I'd been taking her abuse for 6 weeks since she started working here fresh out of college, always telling myself to keep quiet because her father owned the company and my job depended on staying invisible. But something about that slap had woken me up from my passive acceptance. I saved the file with a password and locked my computer screen. Around me, the office buzzed with normal Tuesday afternoon energy, phones ringing and keyboards clicking. Nobody knew that everything had just changed in that break room. I pulled out my phone and started researching employment lawyers in our area, my heart beating faster with each search result. If Madison wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules first. Madison arrived late the next morning, coffee in hand and attitude fully loaded, like a weapon she couldn't wait to use. During our weekly team meeting, she interrupted our project manager 3 times with dramatic sighs and eye rolls, and made exaggerated yawning sounds when I gave my weekly progress report on the Morrison account. When I mentioned the client deadline we were struggling to meet because of her constant interference and last-minute changes, she actually laughed out loud. "Maybe if some people worked harder instead of constantly complaining about every little thing," she said, looking straight at me with those cold eyes that reminded me of a snake. The conference room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Our manager, Trevor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat but said nothing, as usual. He'd learned early that challenging the boss's daughter was career suicide. After the meeting ended and people filed out in uncomfortable silence, Madison cornered me by the copy machine like a predator trapping prey. "That sandwich yesterday was absolutely disgusting," she whispered, standing close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with spite. "Don't mess up my orders again, or you'll regret it." I looked at her calmly and pulled out my phone with deliberate slowness. She frowned, confused by my lack of fear. "What are you doing?" I hit record on my voice memo app and smiled sweetly. "Just making sure I remember your preferences correctly for next time." At lunch, I deliberately chose a table in the far corner of the cafeteria where conversations couldn't be overheard by passing coworkers. I sat with Kenny from accounting and Maya from marketing, 2 people who'd been working here longer than me and had witnessed Madison's reign of terror from the beginning. They'd both seen her behavior escalate week by week but never said anything directly, trapped by the same fear that had kept me silent. Today felt different though, charged with possibility. "She's getting worse every day," Maya whispered, glancing around nervously like Madison might materialize from thin air. "Yesterday she screamed at the new intern for using the wrong stapler. The poor kid was almost in tears." Kenny nodded grimly. pushing his salad around his plate. She told me my monthly reports were pathetic and worthless in front of the entire finance team. I've been doing those reports for 3 years without a single complaint until she showed up. I listened carefully, taking mental notes of dates and details. These weren't isolated incidents or personality clashes. Madison had been systematically terrorizing everyone, counting on our collective silence to protect her from consequences. I asked them both a simple question that felt revolutionary. Would you be willing to write down what you've seen and heard? They exchanged meaningful glances across the table. Maya bit her lip nervously. Kenny looked genuinely scared. But slowly, like sunrise breaking through clouds, they both nodded with growing determination. The facilities manager, Carlos, had worked here for 15 long years, through 3 different owners and countless employee turnovers. He fixed everything that broke, from computers to hearts, and knew everyone's stories better than they knew themselves. I found him in the supply closet, organizing boxes of copy paper, with the methodical care of someone who took pride in small details. "Carlos," I said quietly, making sure no one else was in the hallway, "I need to ask you something important." He looked up from his inventory sheet, his weathered face kind but cautious after years of navigating office politics. "That girl giving you trouble again?" he asked, and something in his tone told me he'd been waiting for this conversation. I nodded, feeling tears threaten for the first time since the slap. He sighed deeply, the sound of a man who'd seen too much workplace injustice. "She's been trouble since day one, that one. Threw a stapler at the wall last week because it jammed on her. Made the cleaning lady cry over some spilled coffee that wasn't even her fault." I felt my chest tighten with righteous anger. "Would you be willing to tell someone about it officially?" Carlos studied my face for a long moment, probably weighing his job security against his conscience. Then he reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small, spiral notebook with pages yellow from age and use. "I write everything down," he said simply, his voice steady with quiet conviction. "Boss's daughter or not, this ain't right." He tore out 3 pages of dated entries about Madison's outbursts, each one documented with the precision of a man who understood that details mattered. I spent my entire lunch break at a law office downtown, sitting in a waiting room that smelled like leather and justice. The employment attorney, Miss Rodriguez, had kind eyes behind, wire-rimmed glasses, and listened to my story without interrupting once. When I finished recounting everything from the sandwich incident, to the coffee mug, to the constant verbal abuse, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers thoughtfully. "Workplace assault is serious business," she said, in a voice that had clearly handled many difficult cases. "But you'll need more than one incident to build a solid case, especially against the owner's daughter." I slid my growing folder across her mahogany desk, my hand steadier than I'd expected. Inside were my typed reports with timestamps, Maya and Kenny's handwritten statements, and Carlos's notebook pages that chronicled weeks of witnessed incidents. Ms. Rodriguez read through everything carefully, occasionally making notes in the margins with a red pen. "This is a very good start," she said finally, approval clear in her voice. "Keep documenting everything. Don't confront her directly, no matter how angry you get. And whatever you do, don't let her know you're building a case against her." She handed me her business card, embossed with gold lettering and a packet of legal forms that felt heavy with possibility. "Fill these out if things escalate further. But remember, going up against the owner's daughter means you need to be absolutely bulletproof." I walked back to the office feeling nervous, but more determined than I'd ever felt in my life. Thursday afternoon brought our monthly client presentation for the Hartwell Industries account, our biggest client, worth over $2 million annually. Madison had volunteered to lead it despite having 0 experience with the account and only 6 weeks of employment under her belt. I watched from the back of the conference room as she fumbled through slides that I'd helped prepare the night before, mispronouncing client names and mixing up key statistics. When Mr. Hartwell asked about specific timeline details and budget breakdowns, Madison froze completely like a deer in headlights. She looked around desperately, her confident facade cracking, then pointed at me dismissively. "Our assistant can give you those details," she said with fake sweetness, that fooled no one. The client looked confused and slightly offended. I wasn't an assistant, and everyone in the room knew it. I was a project coordinator with 2 years of direct experience on their account and an excellent track record. But I stood up professionally and answered their questions completely and accurately, salvaging what could have been a disaster. After the meeting ended and the clients left looking satisfied, Madison was absolutely furious. Her face was red with embarrassment and rage. "Don't you ever show me up like that again," she hissed in the hallway where other employees could hear every word. "I don't care what your job title says on paper. You work for me now, and you'll do exactly what I tell you." I kept walking toward my desk, but my phone was recording everything in my pocket. Friday morning arrived with storm clouds, both literal and metaphorical. Madison stormed into the office 20 minutes late, clearly having had a rough night that showed in every detail of her appearance. Her usually perfect makeup was smudged around her eyes, her designer blouse was wrinkled, her hair was messy despite obvious attempts to fix it, and she reeked of alcohol from whatever party or bar she'd stumbled out of. She slammed her expensive purse down on her desk hard enough to make her computer monitor shake, then immediately started yelling about everything within reach. The coffee was too cold, the office was too bright, someone had moved her stapler, and the air conditioning was making weird noises. When Trevor tried to give her gentle feedback about yesterday's presentation disaster, explaining that the client had called with concerns, she absolutely exploded like a bomb going off. "The client loved it," she screamed, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "They were hanging on every word. Maybe if I had better support staff instead of incompetent deadweight, things would run smoother around here." She glared at me across the room with pure hatred burning in her eyes. I kept working at my computer, trying to appear calm while my heart pounded against my ribs. Around 10 o'clock, she marched over to my desk like a general approaching enemy territory. "I need you to completely redo the Peterson report," she announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You obviously didn't understand the requirements the first time." I looked up calmly and asked the question that would expose her ignorance. Which requirements specifically need to be changed? She couldn't answer because she'd never bothered to read the original brief or client specifications. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water while her face cycled through several shades of red. Everyone within earshot had stopped working and was watching our exchange with the fascination of people witnessing a car crash in slow motion. "Just fix it," she snapped, unable to provide any actual guidance. Then, in a move that crossed every line of professional behavior, she swept my coffee mug off my desk with a violent gesture. The ceramic mug I'd brought from home shattered on the floor with a sound like a gunshot, dark liquid spreading across the carpet in an irregular stain that looked like spilled blood. The entire office went dead silent, except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic outside. 20 pairs of eyes watched to see what would happen next. I stood up slowly, looking down at the broken ceramic pieces that had been a gift from my sister, then back up at Madison's face. She was breathing hard and clearly expecting me to clean up the mess while apologizing profusely for somehow causing her to lose control. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took several pictures of the broken mug and spreading stain from different angles. Then I looked her directly in the eyes and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I'll need you to reimburse me for that mug, and I'll be documenting this incident with HR immediately." Madison's mouth fell open in shock. She wasn't used to being challenged publicly or held accountable for her actions. "You can't talk to me like that," she sputtered, her voice rising to a shriek. "My father owns this company," Madison continued, as if her genetics were a get-out-of-jail-free card for assault and property destruction. "Your father hired me to do a job," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Not to be your personal punching bag or to tolerate abuse from anyone, regardless of their last name." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Around us, coworkers pretended to work while clearly listening to every syllable of this unprecedented confrontation. Madison's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple with rage. She spun around and marched toward her father's office, her heels clicking against the floor like an angry metronome. I bent down and carefully picked up the ceramic pieces, while my coworkers whispered among themselves, the sound like rustling leaves. War had been officially declared in the most public way possible. Within 30 minutes, my desk phone rang with a summons to Mr. Patterson's office. I gathered my documentation folder and walked down the hallway, passing Madison's empty desk where her computer screen still glowed with unfinished work. Other employees watched my journey with expressions ranging from sympathy to admiration to fear. Some had probably never seen anyone stand up to the boss's daughter before. As I knocked on Mr. Patterson's door, I realized there was no turning back now. This conversation would determine whether I still had a job by the end of the day, but at least I'd maintained my dignity and self-respect. The door opened, revealing Madison sitting beside her father's desk, with tears streaming down her face in what was clearly a practiced performance. Monday brought a new development. Madison arrived with a formal complaint form, claiming I'd been hostile and unprofessional toward her. She handed it to Trevor during our morning meeting, making sure everyone could see the official letterhead. "I just want us all to work together peacefully," she said with fake sweetness. Trevor looked uncomfortable as he read through her accusations. According to the form, I'd been insubordinate, disrespectful, and disruptive to team harmony. I listened calmly, then asked Trevor if I could respond in writing. "Of course," he said, clearly relieved to postpone dealing with this mess. During lunch, I typed up my own detailed response, complete with dates, times, and witness names. I attached copies of all my documentation, including photos of my broken mug and the audio recordings I'd made. When I handed Trevor my folder that afternoon, it was 3 times thicker than Madison's single complaint form. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. Trevor scheduled a meeting with HR for Wednesday morning. Madison strutted into the conference room like she owned the place, which technically she almost did. Janet from HR looked nervous as she opened her file folder. "We're here to discuss some workplace concerns," she began diplomatically. Madison immediately launched into her victim story, complete with crocodile tears about feeling attacked and undermined by subordinates. When she finished her performance, Janet turned to me. "Do you have anything to add?" I placed my thick folder on the table and opened it to the first page. "I have quite a bit to add, actually." For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through every documented incident, every witness statement, every piece of evidence I'd collected. Madison's face went from confident to confused to pale. By the time I finished, Janet was taking furious notes and Trevor was staring at Madison like he'd never seen her before. The room was dead silent when I closed the folder. Janet cleared her throat nervously. "These are very serious allegations," she said, looking between Madison and me. "We'll need to investigate everything thoroughly." Madison jumped up from her chair. "This is ridiculous. She's obviously making all this up because she's jealous of me." Her voice was getting shrill, and I could see panic creeping into her eyes. "The witnesses you mentioned," Janet continued, ignoring Madison's outburst, "would they be willing to give formal statements?" I nodded. "I believe so." Madison whirled around to face me. "You're trying to destroy me," she accused. "This is all lies and manipulation." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm just telling the truth," I said quietly. "That's all I've ever done." Janet ended the meeting by saying she'd need to interview everyone involved separately. As we filed out of the conference room, Madison grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. "You have no idea what you've started," she whispered threateningly. I looked down at her fingers digging into my skin, then back up at her face. "Actually," I said, "I know exactly what I've started." The investigation began immediately. Janet called Maya, Kenny, and Carlos for individual meetings. Word spread quickly through the office that something big was happening. People started approaching me quietly, sharing their own stories about Madison's behavior. The receptionist told me about being screamed at for transferring a call incorrectly. The IT guy described being called useless when he couldn't instantly fix her computer. Even the cleaning lady pulled me aside to whisper about finding broken office supplies in Madison's trash can. I documented everything, adding new witness statements to my growing file. Meanwhile, Madison grew increasingly paranoid. She accused me of poisoning people against her and demanded to know what lies I was spreading. I just smiled and kept working. The truth didn't need me to spread it. It was spreading itself. By Friday, Madison was desperate. She cornered me in the parking garage after work, her face flushed with anger and something that looked like fear. "You think you're so smart," she hissed, stepping closer to me between the cars. "But you're forgetting who my father is. He'll fire you before this investigation is over." I stood my ground, keys ready in my hand. "Your father seems like a fair man," I replied calmly. "I'm sure he'll want to know the truth about what's been happening in his company." Madison laughed bitterly. The truth? The truth is that you're a nobody trying to bring down someone better than you." She jabbed her finger toward my chest, but I stepped back before she could touch me. "You know what the real truth is?" I asked. "You're scared. You're scared because for the first time in your life, your last name can't save you from the consequences of your actions." Madison's face went white. Without another word, she turned and ran to her car. Monday brought a surprise. Mr. Patterson called an all-hands meeting for 10 o'clock. The entire office crowded into the main conference room, buzzing with speculation. Madison sat in the front row, her back rigid and her hands clenched in her lap. Mr. Patterson stood at the head of the table, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something more serious. "I want to address some concerns that have come to my attention," he began. "This company was built on values of respect, professionalism, and fairness. Recent events have shown me that we haven't always lived up to those values." He paused, looking around the room. "Effective immediately, we're implementing new policies for workplace conduct and conflict resolution." Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Additionally," Mr. Patterson continued, "any employee who feels they've been mistreated has my personal guarantee that their concerns will be investigated fully and fairly, regardless of who is involved." His eyes met mine briefly across the room. The message was clear. The investigation concluded the following Wednesday. Janet called me into her office, her expression unreadable. "We've completed our review of the situation," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "After interviewing multiple witnesses and reviewing all the evidence, we've found substantive proof of workplace harassment and inappropriate conduct." My heart started pounding. What does that mean exactly? Janet pulled out an official-looking document. Madison Patterson has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending further disciplinary action. Additionally, she's been enrolled in mandatory anger management and professional conduct training. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed immediately by surprise. I'd expected pushback, cover-ups, maybe even retaliation. "Mr. Patterson wanted me to personally apologize to you and any other affected employees," Janet continued. "This should never have been allowed to continue for so long." She handed me another paper. "This is a formal letter of apology for your personnel file, along with a notation that you handled this situation with exemplary professionalism." Word of Madison's suspension spread through the office like wildfire. Some people seemed shocked, others relieved, and a few appeared vindicated. Maya stopped by my desk that afternoon with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "I never thought anyone would actually do something." Kenny nodded in agreement. "You gave us all permission to speak up." But the real surprise came from Carlos. He appeared at my cubicle with a small potted plant. "For your desk," he said gruffly, "takes guts to do what you did. Not many people would have stood up to the boss's daughter." I was touched by the simple gesture. The plant was small and green with tiny white flowers. "What kind is it?" I asked. Carlos smiled. "It's called Courage," he said. Seemed appropriate. As word spread about the investigation's outcome, more coworkers stopped by to share their support. I realized I hadn't just stood up for myself. I'd stood up for everyone who'd been afraid to speak. Madison didn't return to the office for 2 weeks. When she finally came back, she was a different person. Gone were the designer clothes and arrogant attitude. She wore simple business attire and kept her head down. During the staff meeting, she made a brief, obviously rehearsed apology. "I want to say sorry to anyone I may have treated unprofessionally," she mumbled, not making eye contact with anyone. "I'm working on improving my communication skills and being a better team member." The room was awkwardly silent. After the meeting, she approached my desk hesitantly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked quietly. I was surprised by her subdued tone, but nodded. We stepped into an empty conference room. "I know sorry doesn't fix everything," she began, fidgeting with her hands. "But I want you to know that I'm really trying to change." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or fake sincerity. What I saw instead was someone who looked genuinely humbled and maybe even a little broken. "I've never had anyone stand up to me before," Madison continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "My whole life, people either feared me or wanted something from me. When you said enough that day in the break room, it was like waking up from a bad dream." I remained quiet, unsure how to respond. "The anger management classes are actually helping," she admitted. "I'm learning that I used intimidation because I was insecure. I was terrified that people would see I didn't really know what I was doing." This was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd ever had. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally, "but I wanted you to know that what you did, standing up for yourself and everyone else, it was the right thing, even if I hated you for it at the time." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I hope someday I can earn back at least your professional respect." With that, she left the conference room, leaving me alone with thoughts I wasn't sure how to process. Over the next few weeks, Madison kept her word about changing. She arrived on time, completed her assignments without drama, and treated everyone with basic courtesy. It was strange seeing her actually work instead of just throwing her weight around. She even started bringing coffee for the whole team on Fridays. Good coffee. Not the cheap stuff from the break room, but the real test came during our next big client presentation. Instead of volunteering to lead it, Madison asked Trevor if she could assist with research and preparation. "I think others are better suited for client-facing roles right now," she said quietly. It was a stunning admission of self-awareness from someone who used to demand center stage. During the actual presentation, she sat in the back and took notes, speaking only when directly asked a question. The client meeting went smoothly, and afterward, Madison approached the team leader. "You did a great job," she said sincerely. "I learned a lot watching you." 3 months after the investigation, Mr. Patterson called me into his office again. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. "I owe you a significant apology," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I failed as a leader by allowing that situation to continue. I was so focused on protecting my daughter that I ignored what was happening to my employees." He gestured toward a chair, and I sat down carefully. "I want to offer you a promotion," he continued. "Team leader position, with a 20% salary increase and your own direct reports." I was stunned. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I want to make sure this isn't just because of what happened with Madison." Mr. Patterson shook his head firmly. "This is because of how you handled what happened with Madison. You showed leadership, integrity, and courage under extremely difficult circumstances. Those are exactly the qualities I need in management positions." He slid a formal offer letter across the desk. "Take some time to think about it, but I hope you'll accept." I took the weekend to consider the offer. The promotion would mean more responsibility, more stress, but also more opportunity to create positive change. On Monday morning, I walked into Mr. Patterson's office with my decision. "I'll accept the position," I said, "with one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "I want to implement a formal workplace respect policy with clear reporting procedures and regular training for all employees." Mr. Patterson smiled. "Already in the works. Janet's been developing it with an outside consultant." He stood up and shook my hand. "Welcome to management." The news of my promotion spread quickly through the office. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Maya hugged me, Kenny high-fived me, and Carlos just nodded approvingly from across the room. Even Madison stopped by my desk. "Congratulations," she said simply. "You deserve it." It was a quiet moment, but it felt significant. We'd both come a long way from that day in the break room. 6 months later, I was settling into my new role as team leader. The workplace culture had shifted dramatically. People felt safer speaking up about problems, conflicts were addressed quickly and fairly, and productivity had actually increased. Madison had become a reliable team member who contributed without causing drama. She'd even started mentoring the new intern, showing her the ropes with patience I never would have expected. During one of our monthly team meetings, something remarkable happened. When discussing a challenging client situation, Madison raised her hand tentatively. "I made a similar mistake last year," she admitted to the group. "Maybe I can share what I learned so we don't repeat it." The old Madison never would have admitted to making mistakes. The room listened respectfully as she explained her experience and the lessons she'd learned. After the meeting, I pulled her aside. "That took courage," I told her. She smiled, a real smile, not the fake one she used to wear. "I learned from the best," she replied. A year after that day in the break room, I was reviewing performance evaluations when Madison knocked on my office door. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I gestured for her to sit down. "I wanted to thank you," she began, "not just for the promotion or the second chance, but for showing me what real strength looks like." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When you said enough that day, you weren't just standing up to me. You were showing me what it meant to have boundaries and self-respect." I leaned back in my chair, thinking about how far we'd both traveled. "You did the hard work of changing," I replied. "I just refused to accept being treated badly." Madison nodded. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. How many people probably accepted my behavior because they were afraid to speak up? I wasted so many years being angry and entitled." She stood up to leave, then turned back. "I know we'll never be friends, but I hope we can be good colleagues." I smiled. "We already are." As she left my office, I thought about that broken coffee mug, still sitting in my desk drawer as a reminder. Sometimes one word really can change everything.